Sometimes, the worst kind of heartbreak isn't sudden. It's the slow, stunning realization that the life you trusted has quietly unraveled behind your back. In a quiet, suburban neighborhood just outside San Diego, a woman named Lena walked into the lavish foyer of an upscale hotel suite. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Not from the Southern California heat, but from the painful shock gripping her soul. She was 7 months pregnant, her body already strained by the life growing within. Yet tonight, instead of celebrating the miracle of new beginnings, she would bear witness to an unthinkable betrayal. Across the room stood her husband, Brandon, rose in hand, gazing adoringly into the eyes of another woman. In that moment, Lena realized her world was about to shatter forever. Lena had grown up in a modest home on the outskirts of San Diego. Her parents taught her the value of hard work, empathy, and resilience. She was the eldest of 3 children, often taking on the role of caregiver for her younger siblings from an early age. Lena believed that love was sacred, a lesson instilled by her mother, who always said true devotion meant being there for someone through life's most painful trials. She carried this idealism into her adult relationships, searching for a partner who would share both burdens and joys with sincerity. Brandon, by contrast, was the product of an entirely different world. He was born into a family of wealth and status as an only child. Brandon never lacked material comforts. His parents, entrepreneurs who owned several successful car dealerships, ensured he had the best education and upbringing money could buy. In high school, his friends jokingly called him the Prince, and although he often shrugged off the nickname, a part of him reveled in the attention. When he went on to attend a prestigious private college, he carried that sense of entitlement with him, believing that most things in life were his for the taking. Their paths converged one fortuitous evening at a charity event benefiting Hillcrest Children's Hospital's pediatric unit. Lena had volunteered to help organize the raffle. She was busy handing out tickets when Brandon strutted in, wearing a tailored navy suit and exuding confidence. For a moment, she was struck by his polished demeanor and the easy charm with which he greeted everyone. He noticed her too, her kind eyes, the subtle curls of her hair framing her face, and the way she lit up when talking about charitable causes. Intrigued, Brandon approached her booth, introduced himself, and asked a few questions about the hospital's fundraising goals. As the night wore on, he found himself drawn to Lena's genuine concern for others. She wasn't dazzled by his wealth or family background. Instead, she engaged him in deep conversation about healthcare reforms, the needs of underprivileged children, and how everyday citizens could foster real change in their communities. While others lingered near him hoping to impress, Lena challenged his views, questioned his assumptions, and spoke with a conviction that disarmed him. When Brandon offered to buy more raffle tickets than anyone else, Lena laughed softly, telling him to save his money for future charitable ventures and not to treat giving as a game to be won. That laugh, gentle but firm, cut through the noise of the event and left an imprint on his pride. Her gentle rebuke kindled a fire within him. He realized she was unlike any woman he had met, grounded, sincere, and uninterested in superficial gestures. He watched her from across the room more than once that night, noticing how her presence drew people in, not with status, but sincerity. By the time the event ended, he was determined not to lose her. He asked for her phone number in the most polite manner he could muster, and Lena, who felt an undeniable spark, graciously gave it to him. Their courtship was fast but intense. Brandon showered Lena with thoughtful gifts but also showed genuine interest in her world. He visited her small apartment, met her siblings, and even helped her mother shop for groceries. Each gesture, once foreign to him, began to reshape his understanding of connection. Lena, in turn, offered him a refuge from the high-pressure demands of his family's empire. She would listen patiently as he vented about corporate meetings and reminded him of the important things in life: love, connection, and empathy. They would sit on her worn-out couch late into the night, her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, Brandon felt seen rather than admired. 4 months into dating, Brandon proposed in front of the iconic Coronado Bridge, overlooking the glittering San Diego Bay. Lena was stunned. They'd known each other for such a short time, but she felt in her heart that their bond was real and meaningful. With tears of joy streaming down her face, she said yes. The swirl of excitement carried them through an elegant ceremony at the Fairmont Grand Del Mar, where Brandon's parents spared no expense. Lena's family stood proudly by her side, and for a moment, it all seemed like a fairy tale come to life. Yet, underneath the polished veneer of their new marriage, faint red flags waved in the distance. Brandon's temper would flare when things didn't go his way, and he had an unsettling tendency to treat his successes, and by extension his marriage, as trophies that proved his worth. Lena, ever the optimist, dismissed these warning signs. She believed in the vows they had exchanged, to love, honor, and cherish each other. In her mind, these small imperfections were bumps in the road that love and mutual respect could smooth over. She reminded herself of the man who once held her hand with wonder, not entitlement, and hoped that version of him still lived somewhere inside. For a time, it did seem like their union was an unbreakable fortress. Their families became interwoven, and Lena grew close to Brandon's parents, who began to see her as the grounding influence their son needed. She was welcomed into San Diego's high society gatherings, adjusting to the circles Brandon had long navigated. It wasn't the lifestyle she had imagined, but she embraced it because it came with him, her husband and the father-to-be of her future children, and though she couldn't yet envision how drastically life would change, she held on to hope that love would guide them both. In the early months of their marriage, Lena truly believed she had found her forever partner. Even when she occasionally witnessed Brandon's impatience with waitstaff at restaurants or the way he would scold his subordinates at the family business, she convinced herself that his stress levels were simply too high. She assumed his short temper was a product of the pressure he felt, now that he was being groomed to expand the brand of dealerships nationwide. Still, a tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered that something wasn't quite right. She noticed the first real sign when Brandon began coming home far later than usual from work. Previously, if a business meeting or emergency demanded his attention, he'd call or text to let her know he might be late. But in those weeks, he sometimes didn't even bother to inform her, slipping through the door at midnight with vague excuses about last-minute deals and dinner meetings that ran longer than expected. Lena tried to be understanding, but each time she asked for details, Brandon would become evasive, changing the subject or brushing off her concerns. Worse yet, Brandon's phone suddenly became off-limits. Lena had never been the type to snoop through her partner's devices. She believed wholeheartedly in boundaries and privacy, but his behavior shifted from casually leaving his phone around the house to clutching it as if it were a precious relic. He placed it face down on counters and took it with him, even when he showered. One evening, as they prepared for bed, he received a text. Lena jokingly asked who it was, and the look he gave her, cold, guarded, sent a chill through her body. He mumbled something about work stuff and walked away. The changes in Brandon didn't stop there. For years he had always been enthusiastic about their physical closeness. Suddenly his passion waned. He avoided nighttime intimacy, claiming exhaustion from his demanding job. Lena tried different approaches, planning a romantic dinner, surprising him with small gifts, or suggesting weekend getaways. Each effort was met with lukewarm acceptance at best. When she gently confronted him about her worries, he dismissed it all as paranoia. He patted her arm and said, "I love you, Lena, you're overthinking," before promptly shifting the conversation to something else. Lena's suspicions escalated when they attended a gala in support of the San Diego Children's Foundation. Brandon spent most of the evening at the far end of the ballroom, mingling with business associates. Lena, left to her own devices, floated among acquaintances, making polite chatter. During one of these conversations, she spotted Brandon near the champagne fountain, talking to a statuesque blonde in a shimmering red gown. Their body language seemed electric, the woman leaning in, placing a hand lightly on Brandon's arm. He didn't recoil. Instead, he let the contact linger in a way that felt intimate, even from across the room. Lena could sense an undercurrent, something that went beyond casual friendliness. Her heart pounded as she watched them share a quiet laugh. Just as she mustered the courage to approach them, Brandon seemed to sense her gaze. He abruptly stepped back from the woman, adopting a more formal pose. Lena tried to brush aside the knot in her stomach, attributing the closeness to the nature of networking events. But doubt took root in her mind that night, refusing to let go. Later in the car ride home, Lena hesitated for a long moment before asking, "Who was that woman in the red dress you were talking to?" Brandon glanced at her, annoyance briefly flashing in his eyes before he forced a calm smile. "That was Sabrina Collins," he replied, emphasizing the name as if it should mean something. "She runs a marketing firm. My father wants to collaborate with her. Nothing more than a business discussion, I assure you." His words felt rehearsed, as though he had anticipated her question. That night, Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to quell the uneasy churning in her gut. In the days that followed, she noticed that Sabrina's name popped up more frequently. Brandon mentioned a lunch meeting with her at a new high-end steakhouse downtown. Then he supposedly had to attend an urgent pitch presentation at her office. Although none of these individual occurrences proved anything, they collectively chipped away at Lena's sense of security. Every new detail felt like a piece of a puzzle she didn't want to complete. Soon after, a medical surprise threw yet another wrench into Lena's emotional state. At her annual checkup, ironically scheduled months before she intended to start a family, Lena discovered she was pregnant. Conflicting emotions assaulted her. She was thrilled because motherhood had always been a cherished dream, but the timing seemed precarious. Her marriage was on uncertain ground, and Brandon's recent behavior left her worried about how he would react to this life-changing news. She mulled over telling him immediately, but a quiet fear held her back. What if this pregnancy pushed him further away? Or worse, what if his distance confirmed her worst suspicions, that his love and loyalty had already wandered elsewhere? Yet Lena's inherent optimism reasserted itself. She reasoned that a baby might be exactly what would bring them closer. After all, they had spoken so often about raising a family, creating a legacy rooted in love and generosity. Perhaps Brandon was simply overwhelmed by his new responsibilities in the family business and the hype of networking in San Diego's competitive scene. She reminded herself of the nights they lay in bed, whispering dreams of tiny footsteps echoing through their home. Surely that man was still somewhere inside him. She wanted to believe that once he knew about the baby, everything would snap back into place, like a painting that had been knocked askew but only needed a gentle realignment. Hope is a powerful thing, but it can blind us to truths we don't want to see. Lena clung to that hope, believing that the secrets Brandon guarded so fiercely would dissolve into irrelevance once he heard the news. Little did she know, her discovery of pregnancy would collide with an even more shocking revelation, leaving her heart in tatters. At the very moment she needed stability and love, Lena agonized over how to share the pregnancy news with Brandon. She planned a simple but heartfelt reveal, an intimate dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, softly lit with candles, with her surprising him at dessert by presenting a tiny pair of baby shoes. In her mind, he would be elated, all tension forgotten. The dream scenario fueled her for days. She practiced how she would say it in the mirror, how her voice would tremble with joy, not fear. But the reality, once it arrived, was nothing like the fantasy she had conjured. On the evening she chose for the announcement, Brandon didn't come home until nearly 11. He breezed through the door disheveled and reeking of perfume that wasn't Lena's. "Work ran late," he said by way of greeting, tossing his jacket onto the couch. Lena, who had waited anxiously for hours, felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. The pasta had gone cold, the dessert untouched. She had relit the candles twice, each time hoping the next sound at the door would be him. She had spent the entire afternoon cooking his favorite dishes, carefully plating them on the dining room table, only for him to ignore the spread. The candles had burned down to puddles of wax, and the baby shoes remained tucked away in her coat pocket, a secret still unspoken. Summoning courage, she gently took his hand. "Brandon, I have something really important to tell you," she began. He pulled away from her touch, massaging his temples as though a headache pounded behind his eyes. "Lena, can it wait? I'm exhausted," he muttered. Her heart clenched. She had hoped for warmth, a spark of enthusiasm, anything to suggest he cared. Just one moment of genuine joy. 1 second of shared awe. But all she received was distance. In the silence that followed, Lena couldn't hold back anymore. She retrieved the baby shoes from her pocket and held them out, her fingers trembling. "I'm pregnant, Brandon," she whispered, her voice quivering with a combination of joy and fear. He stared at the tiny shoes as though they were foreign objects. His eyes flickered with something, shock, or possibly even annoyance, before he forced a faint smile. "Wow," he said softly, but there was no genuine excitement. He leaned in to kiss her forehead in what felt like a perfunctory gesture. That's good news, Lena." Her breath hitched. That was it? No embrace, no questions, no emotion. A strangled mixture of relief and disappointment flooded her. She had yearned for more than this subdued response. Exhausted, she tried to convince herself that maybe he was simply too worn out to process it properly. Over the next few days, however, his behavior didn't improve. In fact, it worsened. He spent even more time away, claiming work emergencies at all hours. One Friday afternoon, Lena received a call from Brandon's mother, Margot. They had always been on warm terms. Margot was a formidable woman, confident, sharp, and deeply invested in her son's life. She congratulated Lena on the pregnancy in a formal, practiced tone. Then she mentioned something that made Lena's stomach lurch. "I just hope everything works out, dear. I know Brandon's been very busy with that new marketing collaboration. I've heard he's been working closely with Sabrina Collins, perhaps too closely. If the rumors are to be believed, there's more going on than meetings and campaigns." Hanging up the phone, Lena felt a chill seep into her bones. Rumors. She wanted to ignore them, but the pieces were beginning to fit together. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden appearance of Sabrina Collins in nearly every conversation about work. It all pointed to an affair. A wave of nausea took hold of her, and she rushed to the bathroom, retching, not just from pregnancy sickness, but from the mounting dread in her heart. Each heave felt like her body rejecting not just food, but trust itself. That same evening, she mustered the courage to confront Brandon directly. When he finally came home, hours after dinner had gone cold, she stood in front of him in the living room, blocking his path. "I need you to be honest with me," she said, her voice unsteady yet resolute. "Are you having an affair with Sabrina Collins?" For a fleeting second, guilt flashed in his eyes. Then his face hardened into a mask of indignation. "You're being ridiculous," he snapped. "She's a professional contact. You know my father has big plans for the business expansion, and I have to work closely with marketing experts. Why would you even ask such a thing?" Lena refused to back down. She stood her ground. "Because you're never home anymore. Because your phone is always hidden away. Because you smell like someone else's perfume. Because your own mother alluded to rumors," she said, her voice trembling. She took a shaky breath, tears glistening in her eyes. "Brandon, I'm pregnant with your child. If there's something going on, I deserve to know." Brandon's jaw tightened, and he let out a sharp exhale. For a moment, Lena thought he might come clean. Instead, he turned the tables. "You think being pregnant gives you the right to interrogate me like this? You're stressed and you're overreacting. I've told you, it's work." The anger in his voice cut through her, and she saw not a trace of empathy or reassurance. He brushed past her and strode into the bedroom, leaving Lena standing alone, tears rolling down her cheeks. Over the next few weeks, the chasm between them widened into a yawning gulf. Lena silently wrestled with her suspicions, noticing every subtle detail. Brandon's phone buzzing late at night, the hushed conversations he had when she left the room, and the repeated mention of marketing plans that required Sabrina's expert input. Lena felt sick with worry, for herself and for the life growing inside her. She still held on to a slim hope that maybe she was mistaken, or that if Brandon was straying, he might confess and try to fix things. Then, one Saturday afternoon, Lena made a decision she never imagined she'd resort to. She followed him. He had left home in casual attire, saying he had to meet with a client. Lena got into her own car a few minutes later, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She trailed him through San Diego traffic to an upscale condominium complex near the Gaslamp Quarter, trying to stay inconspicuous. She parked a short distance away and watched as he entered the building. About 15 minutes later, she saw him step out onto a fifth-floor balcony alongside Sabrina. Their body language was impossible to misread. He wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her close. She laughed, leaning her head on his chest, her hand resting over his heart. The sight hammered the final nail into Lena's hopes. She snapped a few photos with her phone, tears blurring her vision, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. She felt an odd mixture of heartbreak, rage, and relief. Heartbreak that her marriage was crumbling, rage that he would betray her while she carried his child, and relief that she now had irrefutable proof. No more second-guessing, no more illusions. The truth was laid bare. Brandon was unfaithful, and Sabrina was the other woman. Lena sped away, her mind reeling, sobs choking her throat. Though she wanted answers, she couldn't confront him at that moment. Her heartbreak was too raw. Later, in the quiet emptiness of their home, she gazed at the photos on her phone, realizing that everything was about to change. Her life's foundation was collapsing, but she told herself she had to remain strong. If not for her own sake, then for the child growing inside her. The next confrontation she had with Brandon would be definitive. There was no turning back from the revelations that would soon rock both their worlds. Days passed, filled with an uneasy calm in the house. Lena waited for the right moment to confront Brandon with the photographic evidence. She sensed he was on edge too, as if he sensed the tension brewing beneath her silence. Then one evening, he informed her, without a shred of apology, that he needed her to accompany him to an important business function at a private estate on the outskirts of San Diego. The idea of walking into a room where Sabrina might be present made Lena's stomach turn, but something in Brandon's tone felt forcibly insistent, almost threatening. Gathering her courage, she agreed, knowing she had her own plan. She wanted the truth laid bare, and perhaps a confrontation in a public setting would prevent Brandon from resorting to gaslighting or outright denial. The event was scheduled for the weekend, giving Lena enough time to steel herself mentally. Yet she could never have predicted just how far Brandon would go to humiliate her. The estate was a grand mansion owned by one of Brandon's business associates. Lena arrived on his arm, her heart pounding. She wore a flowing gown that accommodated her growing pregnancy bump. In the glittering lights of the chandeliered foyer, she spotted familiar faces from San Diego's high society, along with a cluster of younger executives she didn't recognize. And then, there was Sabrina, radiant in a silver cocktail dress that clung to every curve. She stood near the bar sipping champagne, her eyes immediately locking onto Brandon. Lena's pulse quickened with anger. At first, the evening proceeded as any formal gathering might: polite conversation, a lavish buffet, and soft instrumental music playing in the background. But Lena could sense something was off. The energy in the room felt charged with anticipation, as if everyone knew a secret. She didn't. She noticed how a few guests gave her sympathetic glances, quickly looking away. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Even the waitstaff seemed more subdued, exchanging glances that danced just out of her line of sight. Then, at the stroke of 9, a hush fell over the crowd, as Brandon stepped to the center of the room with Sabrina at his side. Lena stood at a distance, her chest tightening with each step he took. Clutching a microphone, Brandon cleared his throat. "I'd like everyone's attention, please," he began. His eyes flickered toward Lena for the briefest moment, but his expression was unreadable. "As many of you know," he continued, "I've been working on expanding my family's business into new markets. I've had the privilege of collaborating with one of the brightest marketing minds in the industry." He paused, gazing at Sabrina with a fondness that made Lena's stomach lurch. The room seemed to tilt, the chandelier lights blurring as tears welled in her eyes. Sabrina Collins has not only brought innovative strategies to the table, but she's also become someone I cherish on a personal level. A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd, but no one stepped forward to stop him. Lena stood rooted in place, shock freezing her movements. Her heart hammered so fiercely, she wondered if she might faint. She reached for a chair behind her, steadying herself with trembling fingers. Then, to her horror, Brandon retrieved a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and knelt on one knee in front of Sabrina. "Sabrina," he said, his voice reverberating through the stunned silence, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Lena couldn't breathe. Her chest constricted as though iron bands tightened around her ribs. She was witnessing her husband, the father of her unborn child, publicly proposing to another woman. Guests gasped, a flurry of shocked exclamations filling the air. Sabrina lifted a hand to her mouth in a theatrical display of surprise, feigning a moment of indecision before exclaiming, "Yes, Brandon, of course I'll marry you." The crowd erupted into applause, though a significant portion of onlookers appeared uneasy. Lena spotted one woman in the back, shaking her head in disbelief, her hand covering her mouth. Lena felt tears scorching her cheeks, but she was determined not to crumble. The baby in her womb kicked, as if sensing the turmoil raging through her. For a split second, Lena thought she might collapse under the weight of devastation, but a fierce anger welled up, holding her upright. She forced her way through the crowd, which parted for her like a bow wave slicing the sea. Brandon and Sabrina turned to face her, their expressions shifting from triumph to something akin to alarm before either could speak. Lena raised her voice, her words slicing through the gathered throng. "Brandon," she began, her tone trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "What do you think you're doing? I'm your wife, and I'm carrying your child. How dare you propose to another woman in front of me?" A hush fell once more. People exchanged glances, their faces reflecting horror, pity, and in some cases morbid curiosity. Brandon stood, his demeanor shifting to cold defensiveness. "We're over, Lena," he said flatly. "You just refused to accept it. Sabrina and I are moving forward with our life together. I needed to make it official. Everyone here deserves to know the truth." Sabrina slipped her arm around Brandon's waist, her new engagement ring gleaming under the chandelier. Lena could only stare, feeling as though the world had spun off its axis. Her breath hitched, her legs weak beneath her, but fury kept her standing. "You coward," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You couldn't even tell me to my face. You had to drag me here to humiliate me." Brandon shrugged, a hollow arrogance in his eyes. "I don't owe you anything anymore," he spat. "Sign the divorce papers when they're served. Stop clinging to something that's been dead for a long time." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one dared intervene. Lena's fists clenched at her sides. The ache in her chest turned sharp, as if the betrayal were a blade freshly plunged. In that moment, Lena realized the scale of his cruelty. He wanted not just to discard her, but to break her spirit in the process. Yet she found a spark of strength in the depths of her despair. Lifting her chin, she took a steadying breath. "I will never forget this," she murmured, her voice carrying a solemn promise. "One day, you'll look back on this night and realize what you truly lost. And I won't be there to hear your apology. You've shown your true colors to the entire world tonight. I hope you both get what you deserve." With that, Lena turned on her heel and left the estate, tears streaming down her face. The crowd parted silently, some guests reaching out to touch her shoulder in a futile show of consolation. The doors slammed shut behind her, and her world felt irrevocably changed. As she climbed into a waiting taxi, her phone buzzed with calls and texts. She ignored them all. Lena knew she was at the lowest point of her life. She placed a protective hand over her belly. She might have lost a husband, but she still had a child to protect. And perhaps in the future, a reckoning to deliver. In the days following that disastrous night, Lena's grief was all-consuming. She locked herself inside the master bedroom, the same space where she and Brandon had once whispered dreams about the future. Now it felt haunted by a specter of broken promises. She curled up on the bed, the duvet pulled to her chin, replaying Brandon's proposal to Sabrina in her mind, like a sickening loop. She couldn't escape. Her phone continued to buzz with calls from concerned friends, acquaintances, and even nosy busybodies from Brandon's social circle. With each notification, Lena felt like she was being dragged back into that humiliating moment in the mansion. She ignored most of the calls, though she eventually mustered the courage to speak with her younger sister, Maya, soft-spoken but fiercely protective. "We'll get through this, Lena," Maya promised. "You're strong. You have the baby to think about. Don't let that scumbag's actions define your future." Despite the encouraging words, Lena found the simplest tasks daunting. She had trouble eating, her appetite stifled by the heartbreak lodged in her throat. Sleep offered little respite, as nightmares of Brandon and Sabrina's public display jolted her awake each night. Worst of all, her emotions were magnified by pregnancy hormones, creating a swirling storm of sadness, anger, betrayal, and fear for the future. Amid the swirl of despair, official paperwork arrived. Divorce documents delivered in a crisp envelope with Brandon's attorney's letterhead. The finality of it made Lena's hand shake as she opened the package. Brandon was moving swiftly. He wanted to dissolve their marriage, dividing assets with the cold precision of a business deal. Enclosed was an offer for a monthly stipend until such time as their child reached adulthood, a calculated sum that reeked of hush money. The subtext was clear. Take the settlement and disappear from his life quietly. Lena bristled at the notion of letting him buy her silence, yet practical concerns weighed heavily on her mind. She needed financial stability, especially now that she was carrying a child. Her job, a humble administrative position at a local nonprofit, provided steady but modest income. The cost of raising a child alone in San Diego was daunting. For a few agonizing days, she wavered, tempted to sign, just to ensure her baby's future was secure. But each time she lifted a pen to the dotted line, she thought about that humiliating moment when Brandon proposed to Sabrina right in front of her. She remembered the baby's protective flutter in her womb, as if her unborn child was urging her to stand strong. Lena set the paperwork aside, deciding she would consult a lawyer first. During that turbulent period, she received a surprising invitation from none other than Margot, Brandon's mother. Though Lena initially hesitated, surely Margot would take her son's side, she agreed to meet, sensing a glimmer of compassion in the older woman's voice. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in downtown San Diego. Upon arriving, Margot looked strained and older than Lena remembered, her expensive jewelry doing little to hide the distress etched across her face. "Lena," Margot said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I'm so sorry for what Brandon has done. I never raised him to behave this way." Tears glistened in her eyes, and Lena felt her own well up in response. "I want you to know, you'll always be family to me, and I'm here if you need anything." Despite her pain, Lena was touched by the gesture. She didn't know how genuine it was. Perhaps Margot was attempting damage control. Still, she felt a flicker of relief that at least someone acknowledged the cruelty she had endured. "Thank you," Lena whispered. "I appreciate your kindness, even though I'm not sure where we stand now. I don't want to cause problems." Margot nodded solemnly. "I understand, but please keep me informed about the baby. I want to be part of my grandchild's life, no matter what. And if you need a good attorney, I can recommend one who isn't tied to the family, someone who will protect your interests." The meeting ended with a hug and Margot slipping Lena a business card with the name of a reputable divorce lawyer. Lena walked away with mixed feelings. On one hand, she felt some solace in Margot's support. On the other, she couldn't shake the question. Why hadn't Margot intervened sooner? Returning to her empty home, Lena took a long look in the mirror. Her reflection showed tear-stained cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, and the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not allow the humiliation to define her or her unborn child's life. Though the path ahead looked arduous, she clung to the determination to emerge from this ordeal stronger. She picked up her phone, scrolling past the gossip-laden voicemails until she found the business card's number. With a steady breath, she dialed the lawyer, mentally preparing for a new battle. For her and her child, she would fight. Perhaps in time, she might even find a way to transform this devastation into a source of resilience. Lena's first meeting with attorney Rebecca Norris marked a pivotal moment in her fight for independence. Rebecca was a sharp-tongued woman with salt-and-pepper hair, dressed in a no-nonsense black blazer. Her eyes conveyed both intelligence and empathy, and Lena felt a sense of relief settling in as they discussed the complexities of the divorce case. What Brandon did is not just emotionally devastating, it's legally reprehensible, Rebecca stated calmly, as she paged through the documents Lena had brought. Publicly proposing to someone else while still married? Even if California laws for fault divorce aren't as punitive as in some states, it still paints a compelling picture of his wrongdoing, and that can work to our advantage. A tiny spark of hope ignited in Lena. She had dreaded an uphill legal battle, imagining Brandon's high-priced lawyer steamrolling her. But Rebecca's confidence gave her courage. Over the course of an hour, they mapped out a strategy that included fighting for fair child support, custody arrangements, and possibly even compensation for the emotional distress. Rebecca made it clear that Lena's reluctance to sign Brandon's hush money settlement was a wise decision. Accepting it without negotiation might have locked her into a less favorable position. Beyond the legal realm, Lena began to focus on her emotional and financial stability. She realized that the job at the nonprofit, while rewarding, might not be enough to sustain her and her child in the long run. Swallowing her pride, she updated her resume and began applying for positions at larger organizations, hoping to find a role that offered better benefits and a more substantial salary. Each click of submit felt like throwing a lifeline into the unknown. The process bruised her confidence. She was ghosted by companies, passed over without explanation, and sat through interviews trying to mask her exhaustion and the weight of her pregnancy. She sent out dozens of applications, attended interviews that sometimes went nowhere, and juggled bouts of morning sickness in between. During this phase, she sought refuge in her sister Maya's support. Maya often came over to cook healthy meals, ensuring Lena was getting the right nutrition for the pregnancy. She also accompanied Lena to doctor's appointments at Seaside Medical Center, where Lena felt reassured each time she heard her baby's heartbeat on the ultrasound. She discovered small moments of joy, like finding out she was expecting a little girl. That milestone brought tears to her eyes, reminding her that in the midst of darkness, there was a precious ray of light. As her belly grew, so did her resolve. She confided in a close friend, Rachel, who worked at a startup tech company in San Diego. Through this connection, Lena landed an interview for an administrative manager position. The job was a significant step up from her previous role, offering a flexible schedule and robust maternity benefits. The interviewer was frank about the challenges of the role, tight deadlines, multitasking between different departments, but Lena embraced the possibility of forging a new path. She left the interview feeling cautiously optimistic. Within a week, the company extended a formal job offer. Lena accepted, heart pounding with excitement and relief. Although anxiety still loomed, moving to a new job while pregnant was a brave leap. She sensed that forging ahead was her only option. On her first day, she discovered a supportive work culture. Her boss, a mother of two, expressed understanding for her situation and even provided her with resources on balancing pregnancy with a demanding workload. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Rebecca filed papers citing Brandon's extramarital affair as grounds. Brandon's attorneys responded with the expected bluster and denial, trying to shift blame onto Lena for failing to maintain the marital relationship. They argued that she was emotionally distant and uncompromising, attempting to paint Brandon as a victim of a loveless marriage. In these legal skirmishes, Lena felt her anger well up. But each time she reviewed a misleading statement from Brandon's side, she channeled that fury into motivation. Motivation to fight harder, to not back down. Every day seemed like a balancing act, juggling the new job, attending prenatal checkups, and steeling herself for the unrelenting divorce battle. But despite the challenges, Lena felt an ember of strength glowing in her heart. With each passing week, she noticed a subtle shift in her mindset. She wasn't just surviving, she was laying the groundwork for a comeback. In the background, word of Brandon's public betrayal and abrupt engagement to Sabrina traveled swiftly through San Diego's social circles. Some of Brandon's old friends quietly reached out to Lena expressing sympathy. Others distanced themselves from the drama, wanting to remain neutral. Lena learned to filter her social media accounts, blocking negativity and focusing on constructive support. Through it all, she resisted the urge to lash out publicly, trusting that her best response would be living well and securing a stable future for her child. One late evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Lena sank into her couch, phone in hand, scrolling through job emails and messages from acquaintances. She then stumbled upon an ad for a prenatal yoga class. Impulsively, she signed up, thinking it might help her cope with the stress. The first session felt awkward. She was surrounded by glowing pregnant women who seemed relaxed and at peace. Yet, as she practiced gentle poses, focusing on her breath and the life growing inside her, a calm she hadn't felt in months washed over her. Lena left that yoga studio feeling, not just physically looser, but mentally unburdened. She had discovered a healthy outlet for her anxiety, a sanctuary where she could reconnect with her body and emotions. That evening, she journaled about her aspirations for herself and her unborn daughter. She wrote about building a life filled with dignity, love, and resilience, one free from the shadows Brandon had cast. Step by step, Lena was forging a path forward. Although the sting of betrayal still ached, and the humiliating memories still haunted her dreams, she refused to be defined by the hurt. She chose to be defined by her determination, her expanding skill set, her growing circle of supportive friends, and the immense love she already felt for the child she carried. Little did she know that fate had more twists in store, twists that would ultimately lead her to an unexpected triumph, where karma would spin the wheel of justice in her favor. Brandon and Sabrina wasted no time flaunting their romance. Pictures of lavish dinners, weekend getaways, and her sparkling engagement ring appeared on social media weekly. Publicly, they acted like a power couple destined for success. Privately, however, a far different story was unfolding. Marcus, Brandon's father, couldn't ignore the scandal that erupted when Brandon proposed to Sabrina in front of Lena. Though furious, he kept most criticism behind closed doors, hoping to protect the family's reputation. Sabrina aimed to capitalize on her new status, pushing for bold marketing moves at the family's car dealerships. She proposed glitzy ad campaigns and even hinted at opening a luxury showroom. Marcus, ever pragmatic, listened politely but remained skeptical of her extravagant ideas. Sabrina's drive for instant prestige collided with the realities of the business. She wanted massive budgets, but Marcus was wary of hemorrhaging funds. Despite this, Brandon tried to appease her. He granted as many requests as he could, hoping to prove that leaving Lena was no mistake. At first, Sabrina seemed pleased. She boasted about rebranding the company, confident her touch would transform it into an industry leader. However, the more she demanded, the more tension arose between Brandon and his father. Marcus saw rising costs with few tangible returns. At board meetings, he questioned Sabrina's plans, warning Brandon that reckless spending could damage both their bottom line and investor confidence. Feeling torn, Brandon defended Sabrina in public, while privately pleading with her to scale back. At home, their facade began to crack. Sabrina criticized Brandon whenever his work kept him away from her side. She accused him of valuing the business over her happiness, demanding more lavish gifts and constant reassurance. Heated arguments replaced the honeymoon phase. Brandon, unaccustomed to such relentless conflict, grew increasingly stressed. Without Lena's calming influence, he struggled to maintain any semblance of peace. Meanwhile, rumors circulated through San Diego's high society circles, suggesting that Sabrina might be using Brandon as a stepping stone for her own ambitions. Some speculated that her vision for the dealership's future was a cover for greed. Others whispered that Brandon had rushed blindly into the relationship out of pride. One anonymous post on a gossip blog even referred to Sabrina as San Diego's next calculated Cinderella. Still, neither Brandon nor Sabrina would admit fault. Determined to validate their public image, they dove headlong into planning an extravagant wedding. Costs soared as Sabrina insisted on designer attire, elaborate floral arrangements, and celebrity entertainment. The more critical the rumors became, the more lavish the plans grew, as if their wedding could somehow silence public doubt. Behind their glamorous Instagram posts, quarrels escalated. Marcus demanded financial transparency, while investors grew concerned about frivolous expenditures. Board members began requesting itemized budgets, and internal emails started leaking to the press. Under pressure from all sides, Brandon felt increasingly trapped. The lifestyle he thought he wanted had morphed into a constant scramble for damage control. Unbeknownst to them, these cracks in their perfect image were only the beginning. In chasing validation and ignoring the underlying strife, they set the stage for a downfall even more public than their engagement spectacle. By the time Lena neared her due date, a storm of problems had begun to converge on Brandon and Sabrina's meticulously crafted kingdom. It started with an internal audit of the family dealerships, initiated by Marcus, who suspected irregularities in the new marketing budgets. Sure enough, the auditors discovered overspending well beyond the company's typical allocations. Inflated invoices, unexplained purchases, and questionable vendor contracts pointed straight to Sabrina's newly established marketing department. In some cases, funds had been diverted to personal expenses, luxury travel, high-end fashion shows, and lavish dinners that had little to do with actual business campaigns. One vendor invoice listed a Paris Fashion Week suite as a client engagement space. Another showed a $12,000 payment for brand awareness through luxury gifting. When confronted, Sabrina played innocent. She blamed miscommunication and clerical errors for the discrepancies, but the mounting evidence suggested deliberate misuse of company funds. Marcus was furious. "My son may be blind, but I'm not," he snarled in a tense meeting with Brandon and Sabrina. "This is my family's legacy, and I won't let it be destroyed by selfish whims." Brandon, torn between defending his fiancée and saving face with his father, tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding. But Marcus wasn't swayed. Legal counsel advised that Sabrina's conduct put the company in a precarious position. The business risked losing credibility with investors if word got out that the future head of the dealership chain was involved in such financial fiascos. Then came the break-in scandal. Late one night, a brand-new luxury car disappeared from one of the dealership showrooms. Security footage revealed a suspicious figure tampering with the locks. Initially, Brandon assumed it was a random theft, until the footage showed the thief handing the stolen vehicle off to an unidentified accomplice, who took it straight to a private lot where Sabrina's name was on a lease contract. The news rattled everyone. Though the details were murky, speculation soared about whether Sabrina had orchestrated the theft for personal gain or as part of some convoluted scheme. Police launched an investigation and, while Sabrina wasn't officially charged, the fiasco added another layer of reputational damage. Investors grew skittish. Meanwhile, the lavish wedding plans dissolved into chaos. Vendors began demanding deposits and final payments. The event planner threatened to cancel if she didn't receive overdue fees. In a frantic scramble, Brandon emptied personal accounts and even tried to dip into the business reserves. When Marcus discovered this, he locked down company funds. Furious arguments between father and son followed, culminating in Marcus threatening to cut Brandon out of the business altogether if he couldn't rein in his fiancée. For Sabrina, the cracks in Brandon's facade of endless wealth had finally become visible. She lashed out at him, accusing him of misrepresenting his financial stability. "You made me believe I'd have everything," she screamed during a heated argument overheard by staff at the dealership's main office. "How dare you embarrass me like this? I'm supposed to be your future wife, not some penny-pinching girlfriend." Brandon, who had never been adept at managing conflict without Lena's calming influence, lost his temper as well. He spewed his own accusations, blaming Sabrina for greed and for making impractical business decisions that threatened the entire family empire. Their fights became routine. The once luxurious condo filled with shouting matches and slammed doors. In a matter of months, their dream life had devolved into a nightmarish power struggle. Then, in a final twist of poetic justice, Sabrina herself was caught in a compromising situation. An incriminating set of text messages with a man rumored to be a venture capitalist she'd been courting for new marketing contracts. Brandon discovered them accidentally when he picked up her phone to read a text from a vendor. The screen had lit up near the Bluetooth speaker, syncing unintentionally. The message that popped up wasn't from a vendor, it was a saved thread, labeled only with an emoji. Curious, Brandon tapped. What he found instead were flirtatious exchanges, references to secret meetings, and insinuations that she was open to leaving him if the right opportunities presented themselves. Brandon's world crashed. Rage and betrayal flooded him. He confronted Sabrina, waving the phone in her face. "All this time I trusted you," he roared. "I defied my entire family, cast aside my own wife. And for what? So you could be setting up your next conquest?" Sabrina scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be naive, Brandon. I wouldn't have to look elsewhere if you'd kept your promises. I'm not going to be tied down to a sinking ship." Her voice was cold, unrepentant. She didn't flinch when he slammed the phone down on the marble counter. Her eyes gleamed with something far worse than guilt, disdain. A violent argument ensued, culminating in Sabrina storming out of the condo with her belongings. The wedding was off. Furious, Brandon demanded she repay every cent she'd siphoned from the dealership's budgets. But Sabrina laughed in his face, threatening to take him down with her if he went public with accusations of embezzlement. She hinted she had dirt on Brandon's dealings, implying he wasn't squeaky clean either. "You think I don't know where the real skeletons are buried?" she hissed before slamming the door behind her. The standoff left him shaken, uncertain how to proceed without further scandal. Broken, humiliated, and out hundreds of thousands of dollars, Brandon found himself alone in the echoing condo that now felt more like a tomb of shattered illusion. His father's threats to disown him loomed. The business empire he once believed he would inherit without question was on precarious footing, all because he had allowed his arrogance and lust to dictate his life choices. In the emptiness of that condo, he finally understood the depth of his betrayal toward Lena. He recalled the night he proposed to Sabrina in front of her, the look of devastation on Lena's face, and the unborn child he had dismissed so callously. Brandon realized with sickening clarity that he had lost everything: his reputation, his father's trust, and the only woman who had ever genuinely cared for him. The house of cards he built with Sabrina had collapsed, and he was left standing amid the wreckage, awaiting the final toll of karma's bell. As fate would have it, the final stroke of karma arrived at the same time Lena welcomed new life. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Aurora, a name she chose for its meaning, dawn, symbolizing new beginnings and hope. After a long, dark night, the labor was intense, spanning almost 18 hours, but Lena endured each contraction with a fierce resolve. By her side, Maya offered unwavering support, holding her hand and wiping her forehead. When Aurora finally let out her first cry, Lena burst into tears of gratitude and overwhelming love. In the days following Aurora's birth, Lena felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she had not known in a long time. She brought her daughter home to a modest but comfortable apartment she had recently rented closer to her new workplace. The space wasn't fancy by any stretch, but it was theirs, and it felt safe. A few colleagues from her tech startup job visited with gifts, diapers, baby clothes, and even a crowdsourced hamper of essentials. For the first time since her marriage fell apart, Lena saw a future brimming with possibilities. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings reached their final stage. Thanks to Rebecca's meticulous legal strategy, combined with Brandon's very public affair and the disastrous aftermath, Lena had the upper hand. Brandon's attorneys tried one last round of intimidation tactics, questioning Lena's fitness as a parent and implying she was financially unstable. But Rebecca dismantled each argument with evidence of Lena's stable employment and healthy living environment. Additionally, the courts took into account the emotional distress and the humiliating circumstances that led to the separation. By the time the final judgment was issued, Lena was granted full primary custody, with Brandon mandated to provide substantial child support. Word reached Lena by way of mutual acquaintances that Brandon's finances were in dire straits. Marcus had frozen his access to certain family funds, forcing Brandon to rely on a modest salary and whatever personal savings he had left. He had moved out of the opulent condo and was living in a smaller apartment near the dealership. Sabrina was long gone, and rumors suggested she had left San Diego entirely, possibly to avoid any legal fallout from the embezzlement allegations. Some whispered that the venture capitalist she'd been flirting with had cut ties as well, leaving her nowhere to land softly. One afternoon, a few weeks after finalizing the divorce, Lena was cradling Aurora when she heard a timid knock at her door. Peeking through the peephole, she was stunned to see Brandon standing there, disheveled, shoulders slumped. Even though her pulse spiked with anger and weariness, she opened the door a few inches, keeping the chain latch in place. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Brandon exhaled, looking frail, as if the weight of the world hung on his shoulders. "I came to see my daughter," he said quietly, "and to talk to you." Lena hesitated. Legally, he had visitation rights, though they were structured through a formal schedule. She considered closing the door in his face, but a part of her remembered that Aurora might someday want to know her father. And so, after a moment of deliberation, Lena unlatched the door and allowed him inside. The man who stepped into her living room bore little resemblance to the arrogant husband who had humiliated her. His once confident air was replaced by a hollow sadness. He looked around at the neatly organized space, the baby toys, the warm sunlight streaming through the curtains. When he turned his gaze to Aurora, asleep in Lena's arms, tears glistened in his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, taking a seat when Lena gestured for him to do so. He waited, as if unsure whether Lena would allow him to hold the baby. After a few tense seconds, Lena carefully handed Aurora over, her maternal instincts on high alert. Brandon cradled his daughter gingerly, tears slipping down his cheeks as he stared at her tiny features. "I'm sorry," he finally choked out, looking up at Lena. "For everything. For how I treated you. For humiliating you. For not being there during the pregnancy." Lena stood at a slight distance, arms folded. Part of her had dreamed of this moment, of Brandon coming to his senses and apologizing, but actually hearing the words felt surreal. "I can't change what happened," she said softly but without wavering. "And neither can you. Aurora is my priority now." Brandon nodded, his expression a mixture of regret and acceptance. He asked if there was any chance they could work things out, maybe start over. Lena felt a surge of heartbreak and anger. "We are far beyond that point," she replied, her voice steady. "The divorce is finalized. You have responsibilities now, as a father, and I hope you'll honor them. But as for us, there's no going back." He didn't argue. Perhaps he was too broken to fight. He simply held Aurora a moment longer, then gently handed her back. Before leaving, Brandon asked if he could visit again following the proper schedule. Lena nodded, giving him a short but polite goodbye. After he left, she stood by the window, holding Aurora close. She peered down to see Brandon trudging away, shoulders hunched, the vibrant swagger gone. The contrast between their two paths couldn't have been more stark. Lena felt sorrow for the father of her child, but also a triumph, that she had rebuilt her life without him, and would continue to do so. In a sense, she had already won the battle he had so viciously provoked. She had found new strength, new love in her daughter, and new confidence in herself. And that was how Lena got the last laugh. Not by stooping to Brandon's level of cruelty, but by living a life that radiated genuine hope and possibility. The revenge, if it could be called that, lay in her peace of mind and in the future she was carving out. She was thriving, raising Aurora in a home filled with warmth and authenticity, while Brandon faced the wreckage of the empire he had almost inherited, isolated from the illusions that once fueled his arrogance. Indeed, karma had played its hand. And Lena had emerged with the greatest gift of all, a beautiful baby girl, and a life that was truly her own. As the morning sun filtered through the curtains and touched Aurora's cheek, Lena kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "This is our dawn." Sometimes, the universe writes the best plot twists of all. Brandon and Sabrina tried to feed their egos while stomping on someone else's life, only to end up trapped by their own lies and destructive choices. Lena, on the other hand, faced her heartbreak with courage, rebuilt her life step by step, and discovered real happiness in motherhood and newfound independence. By the time Brandon realized what he'd lost, the door to reconciliation was sealed shut. Dear friend, life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. But as the Stoics remind us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality, because the true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in rising through it. Lena's story is a testament to that quiet, powerful resilience, the kind that isn't loud or vengeful, but dignified and steady. She didn't wait for closure from those who hurt her. She created her own by choosing peace over bitterness, healing over hatred. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply becoming the version of yourself they never thought you could be. May we all have the courage to rise after the breaking and walk forward with grace. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more soulful stories to light.